What are some true scary experiences that you Redditors have been through? Creepy strangers, unexplainable incidents, narrow misses, etc. When I was about 12, I had a lot of issues with night terrors and rarely slept a whole night through. One night, I got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. I sat down, half asleep and thinking of nothing but emptying my bladder and going back to bed when I see movement out of the corner of my eye. There was a man standing by the other door to the bathroom staring at me, not moving. He was wearing a tattered grey jumpsuit and had a crutch, little to no hair. I don't remember how I got down into the basement where my parents slept, but suddenly there I was, hysterical. My dad finally went up and looked in the bathroom and kitchen. Saw nothing but allowed me to sleep on the couch down there anyway. I didn't fall back asleep. About an hour or so later, I heard the sliding door to the bathroom from my sister's room and limping footsteps. The next morning my dad searched around and noticed that the fridge and pantry had been raided. Never caught the guy reposted from previous scary thread a while back. Okay, I got contacts around the time I turned 21, and I had a real phobia of putting things in my eyes. If you live in the US, you know that they won't let you leave the ophthalmologist with your first pair of contacts unless you can put them in at least one time. It took me having to come back 3 days in a row before I could get it right. That's how disturbed I was about it, but I was determined to have contacts. Anyways, I was real careful about rubbing my eyes with them in, because I had this paranoid fear that I would grind them into my eyes. I know. Like I said, I had a real phobia. So, I go to take a bath, and I'm real careful about getting soap in my eyes. Finally, I wash my hair and close my eyes as I douse water on my head. I rub my eyes and open them. Under a vertical bar I realize I'm blind. I can see absolutely nothing. I was in a state of sheer terror. I got incredibly still, and all the possibilities were going through my head. How was I going to get out of the bathtub without help? Was this permanent? How was I going to live my life blind? Then the lights came back on. In the 5 seconds, when I had closed my eyes, the power had gone off, and since the bathroom had no window, I'd been in pitch darkness TL. Doctor, I briefly thought I had gone blind, but it was just a power outage. If it makes any difference, I will preface this by saying that I'm female. That fact may or may not make the following creepier. I used to live next to an eye hospital. One day, walking home, I was stopped by an old man who clearly had trouble seeing. He asked me to help him across the road to the hospital. I agreed, and he grabbed hold of my hand very tightly. At this point I noticed his fingers were stained brown from tobacco, covered in scabs, and his fingernails were very long and dirty. I started to think that my good deed for the day would be a bit regrettable. When we got to the other side of the road he still had my hand grasped so tightly I couldn't politely pull away. "Do you want to see my eye?" he said. One of his eyes was squeezed shut. With his free hand he pulled the lids apart, and I realized to my horror that he had no eyeball, just an empty socket. I started babbling, still trying to be polite about how that was very interesting, but I had to go. Then he uttered the immortal words, "Do you want to put your finger in there?" He was pulling really hard on my hand, trying to force my fingers into his empty eye socket. At this point I gave up on politeness and struggled my hand free. It was difficult. He was really strong and just ran for it. I could hear him laughing as I ran off. TL. Dr. Stranger tried to force me to put my fingers in his empty eye socket. Edit. For clarification, yes, I did once post this before on another thread. Sorry if you've read it before. Not me, but a friend of mine, female, about 22 at the time, worked for Google Maps as some sort of surveyor or photographer. Google sends her and another female coworker to some remote location in Mexico for a few days for business. The hotel they were staying at was apparently nice enough, but literally outside the walls of the hotel was a really rough ghetto with people living in boxes lining the streets. Anyway, the first day of the trip she and her coworker are taking a taxi to the location they have to survey, and at a red light, some crazy guy opens the door, tries to pull my friend out, and then starts stabbing her in the chest with a knife. The cab driver pulled away, but not before she'd been stabbed 6 times. She survived but has pretty bad scars, and has become a much different and quieter person since. I woke up one night and uncharacteristically opened my eyes. Usually I just roll over. Hovering over me, lowering itself slowly from the ceiling by a long thread, was a spider whose body alone was about 7 inches long. Considering I don't live in Australia, I freaked out and rolled out of bed, trying my hardest to stay flat to the frame. I would have to cough off my skin if the thing were to touch me. In the span of a few milliseconds, I roll across the room and flip the light on. I don't see the spider over my bed. It must have dropped off. I search the bed. It's not there. I flip the sheets. It's not there. After several fervent minutes of searching with no results, my adrenaline drops and I begin to realize the truth. There was no spider. Or at least, I haven't seen him since. So there's that. TL. Doctor, I was the ghost all along. During finals week at college, I left the library pretty close to midnight and decided to carry my laptop to my car, which was a block and a half away down a side street. I was completely alone and my phone was dead, but it was pretty well lit, so I figured I'd be okay. As I was walking, a pickup truck driving the opposite way slowed down and did a K-turn behind me and started following me. I immediately stopped, let it pass, and stood by a lamppost until it made a turn down the street where my car was. I went back to the library and asked public safety to walk me to my car. As we got closer, the truck that had been following me was idle in the space directly behind my car and sped off down the street as soon as he saw me and the cop. I almost didn't go back and get public safety because I felt I was being too paranoid. Note, never be too paranoid. I was 16 years old. One Christmas vacation I hitchhiked from Chicago to Los Angeles, made it there in 57 hours, and back took me 3 weeks. On the way back just outside Amarillo, Texas, I was out on the road about 10 p.m. It was very cold. A black Cadillac traveling westbound turned around, pulled up to me, and stopped. The passenger side window opened, and the driver offered me a ride. We talked for a while and eventually the driver told me he was an entertainer. In his nightclub act he was known as the African Queen. As a relatively innocent 16-year-old, I didn't really appreciate what this meant. After traveling a short distance, the old white African Queen propositioned me and asked me to spend the night with him. I declined. He persisted. He asked again and again. Finally he stopped the car. I tried to open the door, but there was no door handle on the door. I could not get out. He put his hand on my leg, smiled, and said he wanted to please me. I got pissed. I said, in no uncertain terms, if you don't let me out of this King car, I'll break your G-Ned neck. He replied, you don't have to get angry. Opened the window. I reached outside the door, opened the door, got out, and he pulled away. I saw his black Cadillac take the next exit, cross over the highway, and continue back westbound. I've got a lot of ulcer-related problems. Stress, drinking, and smoking all play a really big part. This comes back into play later. After a really long drive, 10-hour plus, me and my friend finally get back to my place. For whatever reason I decided to take acid with about an hour left in the drive. I get back to my place, messing around, whatever. Eventually my friend goes to sleep and I start watching Netflix or something. Around 4 a.m., still tripping, I go to the bathroom to take a dump. What my friend didn't tell me was that he clogged it earlier with a big one himself. I walked in, sat down, and went on with my business. Now, as a result of my ulcers and a really long and stressful week, there was a lot of blood in my stool. At least half a cup of blood. I wiped, stood up when I was done, and flushed. There was a horrific gargling sound as the toilet gasped desperately for more air, or water, whatever. Then, before I could comprehend, the toilet discharged back at me. Blood and feces shot over me and the walls, the LSD still in full effect. I froze. I contemplated my life and what I had deserved to be sent to hell. I made zero sound. I did not move an inch. About 5 minutes later I calmly walked out to the living room covered in blood, sweat, and tears, and doo-doo water, and nudged my friend on the couch. Quietly crying, I asked him if this was real life. I'm one of 5 kids, and so growing up I shared a bed with my little sister. She had intense nightmares that were probably worsened by the fact that when she woke up screaming, my preacher father would come in and pray over us so that the demons in the room leave this place. One night, I woke up because I felt someone staring at me. My sister was fast asleep with her eyes wide open and glaring at me and this horrible expression. It freaked me out so bad that I shook her awake and she started shrieking, "Get out," over and over, with her hands clamped to her face, like she didn't want to see anything. Mama and daddy tried giving her a bath to calm her down. She was little, like 5, and baths helped sometimes, but when she wouldn't stop screaming, they took her to the ER. She was severely dehydrated, but the doctors never really figured out what was wrong with her. P.S. This wasn't the only crazy stuff. She used to shake me awake, wailing, "There's a snake in the bed," or "There's a spider on your face," and would be inconsolable for hours. Weird hallucinating 5-year-old girl, FTW. I live close to the woods, and I regularly walk my dog there. I was walking back there one day, and I heard this growling noise. I looked around expecting to see someone's dog that had gotten loose, but instead I saw a freaking wolf stalking my dog. Well, my dog is about the size of a kitten that is a few months old. I ran up to him, picked him up, and ran as fast as I could towards the road. The wolf did chase us for quite some time, but as soon as we got to the road some cars came and scared away the wolf. I thought I was going to die along with my dog. I swear someone was looking after me that day.